Hello everybody, and welcome to this research seminar organised by the Centre for Book Cultures and Publishing. So I can see there are some familiar faces, but I reckon we've got quite a few newcomers as well. So for those of you who aren't familiar with us, we're a research centre here based at the University of Reading in the UK, and we bring together colleagues working across English, Spanish, French, German and Italian language book publishing and book history. We also work with colleagues. We have colleagues from typography and book design working in both Latin and non-Latin scripts and on the printing and publishing trades. So we are really excited to be hosting Francesca Tancini, coming to talk here about her exciting PiCoBoo project, because it speaks to so many of our key interests: printing, books, book design, children's books, and digital methods as well, to name but a few. So just before I introduce Francesca properly, just a few housekeeping points. I think you should all be aware, but we are recording this talk, so you can kind of relive it in your later date, and also for people who couldn't make it. And just while Francesca is speaking, if you wouldn't mind keeping your cameras and microphones off so that we don't get any unwanted interference. And she's going to speak for about half an hour, 35 minutes. So there'll be plenty of opportunities for questions afterwards. So if anything, while she's talking, if anything comes into your head, do pop questions into the chat throughout. And then I'll be moderating with my colleague, Liz, and we'll moderate the Q&A afterwards. So it does make it a bit easier if you've popped questions in beforehand, but we'll be using the chat box primarily in the Q&A, but if things go well, we can maybe come on mic as well. Okay, so without further ado then, let me introduce Francesca. So Francesca Tancini, I should check, I am pronouncing that correctly, aren't I?
Yes, that's perfectly correct.
Francesca Tancini is a specialist in 19th century children's books. She did a PhD in visual studies at the University of Siena, and then has held a number of postdoctoral fellowships at, frankly, an impressive array of venerable institutions, including Oxford, Harvard, Yale, and Princeton. And she also has extensive experience as a curator librarian and a rare book cataloguer. And in that capacity, she's curated exhibitions on Walter Crane at the Houghton Library in Harvard, Aesop's Fables at Bologna University Library, and was an assistant curator at the major exhibition on John Ruskin at the Ducal Palace in Venice. Tonight, she's going to be speaking in her capacity as a Marie Curie Research Associate on running the project PiCoBoo, a research project on the colour printing of picture books for children in 19th century Europe. And that's hosted by the Children's Literature Unit at Newcastle University. And it's in partnership with the Victoria and Albert Museum in London and Seven Stories up in Newcastle, the National Centre for Children's Books. And it's supervised by Professor Matthew Grenby. So without further ado then, let's hear all about this exciting project. Thank you, Francesca.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Thank you all for being so many tonight. It is a real honor to be here with you, and particularly because I have a very affectionate memory of Reading, the University of Reading, and its archive of British printing and publishing there, and its wonderful collection of printing matrices at the Typography and Graphic Communication Department. And also I have to confess that Professor Michael Twyman, a Reading University Emeritus, is ideally at the origins of this project, the PiCoBoo project that focuses on printed color for all to quote the title of Michael Twyman's massive book on chromolithography. So today I will present some outputs of PiCoBoo. As you already said, Sophie, it is a research project funded by the European Union within the Marie Skłodowska-Curie program, hosted by the Children's Literature Unit in Newcastle in partnership with 7 Stories and the VNA. It is supervised by Professor Matthew Granby and mentored by Brian Alderson, with also the collaboration and support of many institutions and scholars, some of whom I see are here with us tonight. So my gratitude goes to them all, because without them, this project would have never been possible. So the project has now reached so to say, its bureaucratic conclusion, but it's not over, as some of its major outputs haven't yet been released. And as the descriptive bibliography of the work of British illustrator Walter Crane, that will be published in 2023 by Yale University Press with the support of the Cox and Children's Library. The PiCoBoo project now. So the project focuses on 19th century picture books printed in color for children as an agent of major cultural changes. We all know that the 19th century saw a major revolution in visual culture, and it was the advent of color, of course. And from the 1830s and 40s, new techniques were developed that allowed to print color in a cheaper, greater, and more refined extent. Chromolithography, Baxter process, chromotypography, chromoxylography, and so on. So the market was flooded by mass-produced editorial objects that were for the very first time printed in color in very high print runs, extremely cheap, and of an enormously high aesthetical and technical quality. So now this major revolution in visual culture had its origin in books for children. And starting from this assumption, the conceptual questions inspiring the project were: how did 19th century children see their world? Did they see their world in color? And with which implications for the culture, society, and the economy? So more strictly speaking, the key research questions addressed by PiCoBoo were the origin and development of mass color printing, and hence the origin and development of color printed picture books, the implementation and dissemination of new printing technologies in Britain and abroad, and the effects of color printing in children's books and picture books and into mass culture more widely. Now, this of color printing in children's books might sound as a well-trodden path, but conversely, it emerges clearly that several topics still beg for attention, and that there are many yet unanswered questions, particularly when an object-based material and technical analysis is carried out. Now, I would like to show you some samples of these yet unanswered questions. I will do it very quickly now and eventually record them later if you have questions. So we all know that in color printing, chromolithography, Baxter process, chromotypography, chromoxylography, as well as in modern offset printing, the color is obtained through the superimposition of 2 or more printing matrices in register. Matrices are aligned so that the different colors transferred through print in the same position form a wide, almost infinite range of tints. And this that I'm showing is a set of progressive sheets, one for each color, for Kate Greenaway's Under the Window from the St. Bride collections in London, just to give you a very quick and rough idea of how it works. But how this was actually obtained is still a matter of discussion in many cases. For example, when the so-called registering marks are analyzed. Registering marks are the signs left on the printed sheets so as to obtain perfect registrations of colors and lines, as these kind of target-shaped marks in this chromolithography by Jakob Ottman from 4 Couples and Lyon in New York. Or in this dot-shaped case of registering mark from a copy of a Tom Thumb's alphabet from the Cotton Children's Library. Other questions yet unanswered are raised by the discovery of material objects. Sometimes nobody knows exactly their use and application, as it happens with this so-called registering frame, this one, stored at the VNA together with 6 printing blocks and 11 progressive sheets for Kate Greenaway's bubbles. Or again, much still has to be said about the use of photography in transferring drawings onto printing surfaces. For example, when photography is used as documented in this magnificent specimen from the Cotton Children's Library's collection. This is a woodblock, the only one in existence, for a Walter Crane's illustration that carries the evidence of a drawing transferred directly onto the woodblock through photography. And you can see that from the drippings and shades of an albumen-like substance. Many doubts involved the actual process or processes for transferring drawings onto the printing surfaces, and many questions, for example, are raised by this uncut but colored woodblock at the Houghton Library. It is unique in its genre. And well, I know, I see that I'm going too much into technicalities, so I won't linger too much on these points, but it's just to let you perceive how many questions are still without answers. Answers that could open new research paths, not only in the history of printing techniques, but also in the history of publishing, in art and visual history, in the economy and culture more widely. Or leaving aside the material aspects of color printed picture books, much still has to be said regarding the international collaborations, exchanges, commercial agreements between printers, publishers, illustrators, manufacturers in the United Kingdom, Germany, the Netherlands, France, Italy. Again, much still has to be said about the way literary and visual culture and taste traveled and spread all over Europe and the Atlantic, making Europe and the Western world a proper cultural koine. So this is a detail from a Walter Crane's toy book translated in Polish, and this is translated in German. So many questions not yet resolved, many yet unwelcomed research paths. I hope to be able to answer to some of them or to provide a tool to help those who will in the future. So now the PiCoBoo database. It is the most, I think, the most prominent and easy to be accessed tool provided by the project. It's sprouted from my personal need of gathering data and details, of organizing them and making them accessible and reusable for wider research purposes. It somehow accommodates materials and knowledge that I have been gathering in the last 10-15 years of research carried out thanks to postdoctoral fellowships and research trips. So the work is still in progress, and only a small part of the data gathered has actually been published in the database as of today. For example, recently some collaborations have been formalized. So only now I am working on collections that I had left behind on hold while I was waiting for to be allowed to publish, for example, images from the British Library's collections or from other institutions that joined the project only recently. So the PiCoBoo database has been launched in June 2019, and it has been constantly updated and implemented since. It is meant to become a key reference point for research in the field. Somehow it seems to be already, if the analytics mirror a real audience out there, but to be honest, I don't really understand much of these website traffic reports. So the database has made accessible a unified catalog. In a unified catalog, a large corpus of books dispersed across countries and institutions, only partially retrievable through online catalogues, not always correctly described, and when described, often not in a uniformed way. So these items are generally anonymous, both for textual and visual contents. They are almost always undated. They are reprinted almost identical for decades, so that it is almost impossible to tell apart the first from later reissues. I don't know if you see them, but you see a similar image on the presentation. So it's almost impossible to tell which is the first and which is a later reissue, just leaning on title, author, or publisher. Sometimes the only clue is the list or the adverts on the back covers of these books. So almost identical title, publisher, series name, and series number might sometimes hide very different objects, as in this case, with almost unchanged covers, or at least apart, color apart, unchanged title, publisher, series number, but with inside pictures redrawn, with the suppression of captions, and with text newly reset. So on the one hand, 19th century picture books are notoriously problematic in bibliographical terms, as they usually don't have colophon or title page, nor date or author. On the other hand, they are often considered as minor cultural expressions, particularly when of the most popular kind. So flimsy, paper-bound, very cheap, as these items. Sold like 2 to 6 pence, up to 1 shilling as a maximum. So they somehow often appear not to deserve philological attention, while my point is that they indeed deserve the same attention and level of detail usually given to pre-1800 books, given the intricacies of their editorial histories. So in the absence of clearly stated publication details, librarians and catalogers simply do not have time enough to cross-check sources and depositories. Librarians will, I believe, readily admit that the great majority of 19th century picture book descriptions in library catalogues inevitably contain incorrect data. Sometimes they are catalogued under series name, or under wrong titles, or under titles given by catalogers. Other times, there is no reference to the list of titles usually appended on the back covers, which usually serves, as we have seen, as the only evidence for date and chronology. At the same time, library catalogs are the main reference point for research. Their lack of correct data seriously inhibits further research. This inevitably entails that wrongly recorded data are transferred and multiplied as a waterfall to a potentially unlimited number of further catalogs. Hence the urgent need to amend these details and provide a reliable source of trusted information for research in the field. So in the past, I have been working as curator librarian and rare book cataloger in institutions where expensive cataloging systems were available, together with the expertise of big IT teams, image recognition experts, and the like. I used to work at the Federico Zeri Foundation in Bologna, and we provided data to Europeana, Artstore, Pharos, etc. While here, with PiCoBoo, I had, so to say, to go solo, not as a part of a wider institutional network or research group. And this meant that I could not count on the expertise of digital humanities teams and the like. But I can go into details about the technical issues if you have questions at the end. So at the moment in the database, more than 500 books are described online, and another 500 are already catalogued, but not yet online because they are waiting for revisions. So the database gathers picture books from the origin of mass color printing in the 1840s, to half-tone photolithography in the 1890s. It documents not only picture books printed in color, but also books printed in black and white, if later reused in color printed books, or if foundational for later color printed editorial programs. So in total, it has more than 500 titles for a total of more than 1,500 copies. 20% of the total amount are titles documented also, if not only, through copies in private collections or in booksellers' catalogues. And this means that these copies are generally unavailable to the public. In this case, the PiCoBoo database is the only repository where these books have been identified, described, and documented in their one-in-a-lifetime resurgence from private collections. Another 20% of the total amount are titles that do not appear to be in existence anymore, but in any institutions or private collection, but they are documented through library catalogues, through publishers' lists, commercial advertisements, book reviews in coeval magazines, or documented through archival documents, printed proofs, or loose unbound sheets. 30% of the total amount have accompanying images, for a total of 2,500 images, with more being added in the next months. So again, since the majority of pictures in the database are pictures taken by me for study purposes during research trips in the past, they usually do not coincide with those already made accessible online by institutions through digitization campaigns, even if, of course, a link is provided to access these as well. So in most cases, the database provides images and descriptions that are not retrievable elsewhere on the web. This has made being possible by the generosity and support of institutions that granted the permission to use images from their collection or helped with bibliographical hands-on checks on selected items. And really, I would like to take this chance to once again thank them all for this priceless added value to my project. So the database also forced me to reconsider some of the initial principles I had set when theoretically designing it. At first, I wanted to include only color printed picture books, printed for a mass market and sold for a very cheap price. But then I realized I also had to include books printed in black and white only, because many pictures were later printed in color, but were originally commissioned and published in black and white. And also I wanted to document these aspects in these aspects of the same image. So I also had to include not only toy books, so cheap picture books, but also larger books of this kind, paper bound or a cloth bound, because they, or this kind, because they contained images that were first published in smaller and cheaper picture books. So I also wanted to document the reuse of these images in different editorial formats, genre and publications. So at the moment, the PiCoBoo database documents only British titles, but more examples will be added from other European countries and America. So now more into the database contents. Each description adopts the traditional bibliographic areas used worldwide in book cataloging. And to be honest, it is a very traditional database. So it records title, variant titles, first line with poetry and nursery rhymes, publishers, printers, publication date in square brackets when inferred from external sources. It records series name and number, price, authors, not only the author of the text, but also illustrators, engraver, printers, translators, thus implying that books, that 19th century picture books were the result of a collective, creative and commercial process. It is also, well, typology is also recorded. So toy books, alphabet books, indestructible books, coloring books, and they are from a controlled vocabulary. So they can be used as a filter for further research. Description, that is size, format, foliation, pagination, collectional formula, signature notes, description of wrappers, covers, edges, spines and papers, description of inside illustrations, registering marks, source for attribution, source for date, where you see printing techniques, and here again from a controlled vocabulary, coeval advertisements, and this is particularly significant since they sometimes provide the only source for date when cross-checked with other bibliographical detail. Variant descriptions, bibliography and links to other online repositories. And here a fitting example could be Sue Walker's Kids Type and University of Reading's Kids Type, for example, as PiCoBoo doesn't focus on the typography of books. I all the same thought it could be interesting for its user, for PiCoBoo users to have the chance to further examine these specific aspects of picture books. So in this and similar cases, a link is provided. The database also records copies in public institutions, private collections, market copies, and records copy-specific details when present. So for lens types, breaks in stereotyped or electrotyped plates, binder stickers, inscription stamps, provenance, shelf marks, session dates, links to local catalogues through permalinks, links to online digitizations when available. And it is also been specified if I have not been able to proceed to a direct book in hand analysis of the copy in question, or if the copy has been analyzed through digital reproduction only, or again, if librarians have been able to carry out checks on bibliographical, on physical copies for me. So when no specification has been made, it means I have analyzed the copy in person. The database also records documentary evidence for the book described, such as archival documents, preparatory drawings, proofs, with links to the repositories when available. And it provides links to or description of other versions where the same images have been used. And it also provides links to WordCut through the OCLC number when possible. So each title is given a permanent PiCoBoo number with hopes that the database becomes a reference for future studies, as it happens for incunabula with the Geve, or for children's books with the Opie or Osborne collection catalogues, and images, of course. So when possible, blanks have been digitized as well, so to give a fuller idea of the book. One added value of the database is that horizontal searches are possible. So it is possible, for example, to quickly analyze the appearance of a whole series, as in this case, by clicking to the series name, one can access to the whole series, or by clicking to, for example, the printer's name, the whole of his production documented in PiCoBoo database is accessible. The same for example, printing techniques. So clicking on resin grain technique, for example, you can access all the linked titles. And the same for typology, for example. So by clicking on alphabet book, you can access all the alphabet books in the database. Search can be performed through series name, ordering institutions, printing techniques, and so on. So the digitization also allow, I hope, a quick identification of the variants described and their features. And this is hoped to be useful to librarians, cataloguers, collectors, and booksellers in identifying the copy they have at hand in order to better describe and date it in their catalogues. Also, I shall add that an expansion of the actual website has been designed. It is currently under development, so it is not online yet. The idea is to make available through the data gathered in the database a wholly documented history of printing and printers, illustrators, binders, publishers, and authors of Victorian picture books. So I am now showing you a few screenshots as a preview, but again, it's not online yet, just to give you a quick idea of its purpose. But I might say that much still has to be done here in terms of graphic design and content visualization. So there will be a searchable list of the different manufacturing figures, publishers, engravers, binders, and so on. And details will be recorded about their addresses and captions with dates and further references in coeval advertisements, series title, numbering, and features of the series linked to the PiCoBoo descriptions, bibliographical biographical details, pseudonyms, monograms, and signatures for illustrators or engravers, for example, and so on. So the database is ideally implementable without limits, or with few limits. The details and data gathered during the last years are massive, and most of them has yet to be inserted in the database. So I believe it is only a matter of time and dedication, but I am strongly committed to it. And I would very much welcome the further participation of other institutions and the suggestions and comments from you in order to have a more efficient tool for research and cataloging in the future. So thank you very much for listening.
Hi, Francesca. I feel that just massive clap. It's one of the disappointing things about Zoom is we can't all give you a massive round of applause. But thank you so much for what is such a you know, the introduction to such a rich and incredibly impressive resource. And you know, halfway through, I was just sort of thinking, oh, I wish I'd had access to this when I was doing research on the 19th century. And also, you know, I would just want to, you know, there's so much you could see. You just want to see more and more, and then you get quite greedy, I think, probably. So thank you very much. Just to say to everyone in attendance, you know, please do pop your questions into the chat initially, and let's get some conversation going. And lovely to see people showing their enthusiasm there in the chat. But, you know, I think I was particularly struck by just how you're using your kind of multiple specialisms and bringing them to bear here in such a creative and you know, interesting way. And you know, I've got all sorts of questions, and I don't want to be greedy, but I suppose, you know, the question that sort of pops into my mind, and here I'm going to show my ignorance in many ways of sort of 19th century picture books. But, you know, speaking to somebody who's got access and sort of knowledge of this great database, I sort of wanted to understand a bit more about target age ranges, because, you know, I can see all these different sort of little children, young boys, the nursery, and sort of that. Did you get a sense of there being a kind of a broadly, are they aimed at younger children in particular, this kind of material, or does it really kind of cross lots of different age ranges? You know, how old do you think the kind of audiences these books are targeting would be?
Yes, well, there are, it's quite rare to find a specific, I mean, up to my experience, it's quite rare to find specific information about the reading public, but the text sometimes has a syllable division, or as the notation larger types, or sometimes with the religious tract society, for example, you have the idea that they were addressed for a specific audience, for like Sunday schools or things like that. For sure, the audience is usually of, I would say, a primary school audience, because of the way the text is typeset. So of course it's meant to help the readers in learning their reading skills, but also this is my idea, from with the start of color printing and the image taking over like powerfully over the text, they were also often meant to give an experience that was that of amusement and entertainment, not only that of learning and like as it happened with like with primers or school books, even if primers are sometimes published in a very similar fashion. So this again, it's something that will be retrievable in the database, starting from a typology search. So of course, searching through alphabet books or searching through primers or school books, the users could have a better sense of the strengths and fashions, I would say, of this such a wide editorial format. So yeah.
Fantastic. Yes, so thank you. I can see we've got a question here from Anne asking, were the author and illustrator the same person in series? Because the illustrator and publisher is shown, but not always the author.
Yeah, well, the authors were usually, the texts were usually traditional texts. So even when you have, for example, texts that could be could be linked to named authors, as in this case, the text, of course, is never the literary one of the first edition, and usually you never have neither the notation of the author of the text and neither that of the illustrator. So it is a very hard work is needed to understand, to spot the monogram sometimes, and in order to understand who is the artist who actually realized the illustrations. Sometimes named series had named illustrators. So this happened, for example, with Walter Crane, Randolph Caldecott, but also with less known authors or illustrators. So within the same large series, you usually find the same hand, I would say, the same artist realizing more than one title. And this sometimes, from an art historian point of view, is a help, of course, in identifying a hand, an artist, better. Of course, this was linked to very practical reasons, because the publishers usually asked the engravers to act as a middleman, so the engraver could really find the right artist and then commission one or more, usually more, titles. So yes.
Fantastic, thank you. We are, next up is Mark, who's asking, he works on 20th century alphabet books and is encountering many of the same issues surrounding bibliographic information and you know, such as authors or date of production. And, you know, of course, are there plans to broaden the date range of the database?
Well, I don't know, we could conquer the world. But well, this is about 19th century, mainly because it is a period, well, it's a very broad period for a start, but then it is also, it has specific features, because of course we have a mechanical printing techniques, which were very often mixed with hand, I would say, manual ways of finishing the book. So very often, even when we have books like late in the 1860s, when mechanical processes were very largely in use, we have books that are partially printed from the machine, like mechanically, and partially colored by hand. So they were kind of refinished with stencils or brush strokes in order to have a better quality. So I think these features are typical of the 19th century, while in the 20th century, perhaps it's even more difficult, because it's quite close in time to us. So it's difficult to really find a documentary evidence. I mean, for those areas of publishing that are traditionally considered very, well, not worth of attention. So I don't know if this is Mark's experience, but what I found is that it's very difficult to really find experts in printing, in 20th century printing techniques, when photography was largely used, photolithography, offset printing started. There are several specific problems in the ways color was divided into matrices and so on. So I don't know if, so, well, of course, there, well, my original idea for the project was to establish a network of public institutions having collections, having important collections of picture books, no matter the chronology. But of course, because of the pandemic and other things, it was not possible to really go for I would say an outcome that really needed networking possibilities that were not possible with the pandemic. So, but please, Mark, do write and let me know what your work exactly is about.
Thank you very much for such an extensive answer, and I would sort of reiterate Francesca's plea, if anyone does sort of know about the sort of color techniques and so forth in the 20th century, where to look, that would be really interesting. Thank you, Megan. I think there's going to be lots of questions asking you to kind of expand expand further, but you know, she's saying, you know, it's an amazing resource, and wonders if you'd found any books from Wales, and how I suppose that model could be expanded into other periods. I think you've kind of perhaps answered the second part, but
yes. Yeah, and I have to say that I didn't focus on that in my talk, but in order to better organize the contents of the database, I proceeded through publishers and series. So no, nothing from Wales, because I mainly worked on London publishing firms.
Mm-hmm. And then Alison is asking how the database handles translations, you know, and, you know, if you know that a work is a translation, is it marked as such, even if you have not identified the translator?
Well, if the translator has been identified, yes, the translator is listed among the authors. And of course, sometimes, well, a text is presented as a translation, but it's completely different from the original source. So this would open to a completely different subject, I would say. So I would say all the information gathered, all the data collected have been inserted in the database. But of course, it's not a project focused on the literary contents of textual contents of these books. So not really.
Thank you. And then Nicola is asking, the bibliographic information you've collated here is amazing. And I think she's speaking for all of us there. And she's got a big question though, is could you say a bit more on your research premise that colour in children's books led the printing revolution in colour?
Yes, this would be the subject of a major book, actually. Well, the point is that it is printed color in books is massively present in children's books. And since these items I showed you have at the same price of a packet of cigarettes or a ticket to a pantomime, or of course they had an enormously wide impact on the young population. Of course, I know there are posters, billboards, lottery tickets, ephemera in general that should be taken into account. But it is my belief that when speaking of editorial products, picture books for children are really the place where printed color really found the most powerful venue, I would say, to change widely the culture of the time.
Thank you. And while we perhaps see if Nicola gets back to your
yes, I know about Rod Bannon. Yes, we've been talking about his lottery bills for hours, actually. So yes, I do see the point.
Thank you. We've got a question from Liz now. Did publishers commission illustrators to copy popular and higher profile artists, like Greenaway? So can you detect stylistic trends over the period covered by the database?
Yes, of course, of course. So Walter Crane, Caldecott, Greenaway were, of course, very powerful in setting a taste, and the same was for artists from Germany, for example, that were widely published in the UK, or artists from Germany, from France, and of course they kind of settled the basis for a change in style. So yes, of course, this would be a matter of yet a different expansion for the database. Because in my past, well, I've been working at the Federico Zeri Foundation, and what we did, if I can, I don't know, just elaborate a little bit. So we, the Federico Zeri Foundation has the most important archive of photographs of artworks, where of course we have Giotto, we have Michelangelo, but we also had many anonymous painters in the style of Giotto or whatever. So in that case, we made a very big effort in specifying which style or school the anonymous artist was kind of working, in which kind of style. Well, in this case, I have to say that I tried and pondered if to specify that it is an imitator of Walter Crane or an imitator of Kate Greenaway, but then this would have taken too much time, to be honest, and as you know, working with such a wide and large amount of books, I don't know. I think at some point in the future, I will kind of take a stop and analyze if I can in some ways add details inside each description, each book description, to better spot trends and recurrent features in the hands of the illustrators.
Really interesting, thank you. And DM here is asked you if you could expand more about your bibliographic methods, please. You know, how do you orientate and order vast amounts of information that have either no central reference point or inaccurate references, such as the British Library catalogue?
Yes. Well, what I do is, well, I start from coeval magazines as Publishers Circular, Booksellers, Athenaeum, and I take note of all the books for children with images, with pictures printed in color, published by a named publisher. Then I try and identify the list of, well, the titles in the list. Also, another source is to start from the lists, the title lists on the back covers, while of course the numbers are changes, and well, there are several, and the other source are publishers' catalogues, wholesale catalogues. As you probably know, the National Archives in Kew hold the Routledge and Kegan-Paul archive on loan from the University College London. Again, in Reading, there is the archive of publishers and printers. So starting from archival research and then cross-checking titles and information from archival resource with coeval magazines and listings. I usually have a more, I would say, precise idea of which titles for every series, when a title from one series was then taken to another series with perhaps changed covers or enlarged wood blocks or reset texts and so on. So it's really a very it's time-consuming archival research as a start. I don't know if I have answered. Okay.
Yeah, what's coming through is just the incredible amount of research and also networking. You know, huge amount of collaboration has gone into this this resource, which is really impressive.
Yes, I really have to say that without well, I've been very lucky because during fellowships and research trips, I really had the chance to meet very enthusiasts, curators and scholars, and this has really been of real it has been of real help, because really without them it would have never been possible. Plus, I have to say that I have a background as an art historian, not as a bibliographer. I had no background in library sciences, even if I've been a curator librarian for 15 years. So I really had to make kind of build my own tools, and scholars and curator I met during fellowships have really been a great source of knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Francesca. It looks like we've finished with the questions, but obviously, you know, that I think I just wanted to say thank you so much, and I think we're all going to go away and have a good old play with the database, and we'll look forward. There's more to come, isn't there? That's right. It's
yes,
built at the moment. So yes, good luck with that. And obviously, I think the impression I get from everybody is that we just want to see it grow and grow and grow.
Well, thank you very, very much to you all. It has been a real pleasure to be with you tonight. So thank you.
So thank you, Francesca, and thank you to everyone who attended. And just to say that we have another research seminar next week, which will be by our colleagues Sue Walsh and student Temelalua Odubesan, and they're going to be talking about the Heinemann African Writers Series archive and the graduate research project in those. So thank you, everybody. Have a lovely night, and do stay in touch. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.